Alrighty, so this afternoon I'm out here replacing a fuel injector line on my backhoe. But, as usual, had something on my mind today. There's this fallacy going around about biblical evolution. Alright, so first, let's qualify what evolution is. Evolution, so far as what I'm talking about right now, is defined as a microorganism turning into a more complex microorganism on through the animal kingdom until man becomes self-aware out of that. Alright, which is actually not dissimilar to Darwinian evolution. Alright, the only difference with Darwinian evolution is that God, or Yahweh, is not the driving force behind the ever-increasing complexity of life. But it still is basically the same thing. The only difference is the people who stick to or believe in biblical evolution simply say that all of that stuff happened, but God made it happen. That's ridiculous. Alright, for starters, Scripture lays out in Genesis chapter 1, the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth day, all the way up to the sixth day of creation, and then the seventh day, Yahweh rested, and Scripture says that He ended His work. Alright, so the word for day used there is Yom, like Yom Kippur. You know, and all those other different phrases like good morning and good day and stuff like that we speak in English. It simply means a day. You know, what we would call a 24-hour day, or possibly even only the daylight hours, because, you know, it says that God separated the light from the darkness, and the light He called day, and the dark He called night. Alright, but I'm not getting into what constitutes a 24-hour day, or a 12-hour day, or a daylight hour day, or, you know, however you divide up your day from night, you know, one day from the next. I am going to stick with the evolution discussion for just a minute here. Alright, so biblical evolution. Evolution happened just like it says it did in the text. Says it did in the textbooks, except God made it happen. Well, we've already established that scripturally that's not true, because that's not what Scripture says. Alright, so to move on to the next aspect is, if you flip to Exodus chapter 20, I don't remember the verse range, but I do know it's Exodus chapter 20, when Yahweh, or God, is given the commandments to Moses. You know, the fourth commandment says, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy, for in 7 days God created all of creation, you know, and on the seventh day He ended His work and He rested. Pretty plainly cut and dry right there. Alright, so other folks like to stick to, or like to throw out that little scripture that says, well, Scripture says that a day is to 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is to a day to God. Well, what that means is that He created it in 6 days and rested on the 7th day, so we have a 7-day period. And we know from Yeshua to now is in the neighborhood of 2,000 years. All right, we know that everything from creation to Yeshua, or Jesus, was 4,000 years. So that gives us 6,000 years, roughly. A little bit less than that, actually. And we know that there's going to be a 1,000-year reign of the Messiah on the planet Earth as we know it, except for what He changes and corrects when He comes to rule for the 1,000 years on the earth, which is not the end of His rule, because He rules for eternity. But that 1,000 years completes a week of 1,000-year periods. You know, because in Torah, the land is supposed to have a Sabbath. Okay? Well, does that mean that when you're farming, you just don't go and do anything to the land on the Sabbath day or the 7th day? No, that means that for 6 years you farm the land, and the 7th year you let it lay fallow. All right? So that's a week of years. So we have weeks of days, we have weeks of years, and so why is it such a stretch to think that we would have a week of millennium? But to go a little bit more in depth, you know, I'll say going in depth in the philosophical side of it. On the 6th day, God created Adam, formed him from the dust of the ground, and breathed the breath of life into him, and man became a living soul. Are any of the animals living souls? So if none of the animals are living souls, then that means that somehow a soul evolved in us. Sorry, my dog's over there making noise. They're playing with each other. Let's go take a look at that right quick. Lo and behold, I pick up the camera and they stop playing. Isn't that always the way it is? So anyway, during the course of divinely inspired evolution, somehow an animal soul evolved into a people soul, or, you know, human soul, that is going to last for eternity. Or either at the point that Yahweh had the last monkey give birth to a human man or woman, at that point God put a soul in the human, but the monkey didn't have a soul. Or either animals, including the very first bacteria from which man would had to have evolved, had a soul, and they are eternal as well. So they're either eternally saved or they're eternally condemned. All right. What kind of sense does that make? You know, how do we preach the gospel to the animals? You know, and then what about the difference between clean and unclean animals? You know, are the unclean animals forever denied the ability for salvation? I mean, do you see how spiritually that doesn't make sense? Let alone the simple fact that biologically and chemically and you know, in the realm of physics, you know, all the way from astrophysics to quantum physics, you know, there's no kind of evolution that makes sense, divinely inspired or otherwise. But, you know, spiritually it doesn't make sense, because either all the animals have souls, or somehow a soul evolved in us from the animals. But, you know, really, if you want to get right down to it, the simple fact is that Scripture says Yahweh created the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day he rested. And Exodus chapter 20, the 4th commandment, confirms just that. Or that means that Yahweh was lying when he said that to Moses as he was writing the stone tablets. Or Yahweh said something to us that was deceptive or something, otherwise just covered that. Or the Bible is wrong. There's somebody's added something to it, or, you know, changed something that was in it, or something other like that, in which case we can't trust the Bible. Because if any of it is corrupt, how can you trust any other part of it, because you don't know whether that other part was corrupted or not. So when you get right down to it, there's no form of evolution that makes sense anywhere. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up, because I want to finish this backhoe this afternoon. It won't take me but a few minutes. I'm already almost halfway there. And y'all remember Acts 17, 10, and 11. The Bereans received the word with all readiness of mind, yet searched the scriptures daily to prove whether those things be so. And remember, the scriptures that they had was Torah and the prophets, because the New Testament hadn't been written yet. And 2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 15, study to show yourself approved before God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. It's your responsibility to study scripture for yourself. Don't let somebody else tell you what it says and what it means. Now, that's not to say that you can't discuss it and that other people can't teach you, but, you know, ultimately it's between you and Yahweh, which Yahweh uses people to teach other people. He's used other people to teach me. He's used me to teach other people. You know, glory be to Yahweh. I hope to see you all in the kingdom of heaven. Have a good night.